attention, please.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good afternoon. I see that there are some people still walking in. Take a space in the room. We're very happy to see that we're with that many, and I think that only leaves for me to say good afternoon, hello, and welcome everybody. From whichever part of the world that you're watching from, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this European Climate Pact event, Together in Action. Now, I'm very happy to see that we're with many people. We have people joining us here live in the room, but also people joining us online. So to all those of you watching online, a very warm welcome to you as well. My name is Haji Yacoubi. I'm a former United Nations Youth Representative for the Netherlands, a next generation keynote speaker, co-founder of Network 2100, but above all, very delighted to be your moderator for today. Now, we have an exciting afternoon ahead of us, celebrating some amazing stories of the past couple of years and taking in a lot of inspiration for the future to come. Because from its launch in 2020, the European Climate Pact has been a whole of society platform dedicated to getting climate action out there on all different sort of levels. Little fun facts for you to know. Did you know, for example, that there are over 800 climate ambassadors that we have across Europe? Can I see hands from people that are a Climate Pact ambassador? Okay, now this is actually a strict question because we have a lot of them sitting here, but this is just to showcase to all of you that, you know, it's very cool to be a Pact ambassador because you get your own corner in the room. So for those of you that are still doubting, maybe this can convince you. But over 800 Climate Pact ambassadors that, you know, put in the work every day to make sure that we move that climate action forward. Also very interesting to know is that we have over 100,000 people across Europe that have signed up to take carbon-saving steps in their daily lives. Now, just to give you a little bit of context, this represents carbon savings equal to over 24,000 round-trip flights between Paris and New York. So I would say that is quite some effort that is being put in there by all those people. And also very good to know that over 300 organizations and groups have pledged to take carbon-reducing steps. Now, if we take all of this in, all of this combined with various citizen engagements, events, and activities, then I dare to say that that makes it clear that the Pact has moved the dial on getting Europeans active and in action for climate. And now, here we are, exactly 2 years later, all of us here together to celebrate and take stock of those past 2 years. So I would say exciting things that are ahead of us in this program for today. But before we get into that, I do have some general notices to make, some housekeeping rules, as they say. It's good to know that everything that is being said through microphone and that is being recorded will be directly related to the web stream that is online as well. So if there is any of you that do not want to be recorded, that you don't want to be on the image, we have a couple of rows of seating at the very back that have a plaque that reads "No photos." And if you sit there, then you will not be recorded. So if you feel like you don't have your best hair day today, that might be a safe spot to sit in. But I can tell you and reassure you that you all look lovely, so no need to do that. Additional to that, it's good to mention that there is interpretation available in the following languages. We have interpretation in English, Spanish, German, Greek, French, Italian, Hungarian, Dutch, Polish, Portuguese, and Swedish. You name it, and we have it. There's a channel selector in the front of each sheet for our participants here in the room with us, and you can use it to change and choose the language that you want to listen to. Now, to the people that are joining us online, you will see at the very bottom of the video screen that you can select the language that you want to listen to. Now, additional to that, another good thing to mention, I would say the holy grail thrill of all events. It either makes or breaks the event, Wi-Fi. We have it. So if you look here at the screen, you will see the details to log into. The Wi-Fi is called EC_guest. Do make sure to log in, because we will be asking you, to join into the session later on. Share your thoughts, your questions, comments that you have via Slido. Make sure that you have Wi-Fi. For the people at home, same thing, but they'll have their home Wi-Fi for sure. Now, finally, I can imagine that many things will be shared today probably that might really resonate with you, or things that you really agree with, or maybe you do not agree with at all, or maybe things you just simply want to share. Whatever it is, if you want to post on social media, do make sure to use the hashtag EU Climate Pact, and make sure to tag DG Klimaat, and they can repost all of your brilliant thoughts throughout the day. But it's also nice for each other, right? That you can sort of see what other people are saying and getting out of the sessions today. Now, with all those general notices being said, let's get on to the fun part and hear from some EU Climate Pact ambassadors in this video.
Hola, soy Carmen Márquez Ruiz, soy una embajadora valenciana. Mi mayor logro ha sido reunir a los embajadores españoles para crear una red muy potente de ciudadanos comprometidos con el Pacto Verde Europeo.
Salut, Samuel, France. J'ai organisé une journée média sur l'invasion de crabes bleus dans l'étang de Canet, en zone Natura 2000, ce qui a attiré l'attention et permis la mise en place d'un plan d'action de 400 000 € par la région Occitanie et les services de l'État.
W projekcie Connecting Europe Express w celu promowania kolei jako ekologicznego środka transportu. Przeprowadziłam peer parlament, wystąpiłam na TEDx European Climate Pact z prelekcją na ratunek klimatowi, a podczas Igrzysk Wolności Zielona Niepodległość opowiedziałam o roli jednostki na rzecz klimatu.
Olá, meu nome é Bruno Lisboa, eu sou brasileiro, cidadão italiano e embaixador junto com meu parceiro aqui em Portugal. As nossas maiores conquistas foi a possibilidade de compartilhar com a comunidade através dos nossos eventos e conteúdos em social media a necessidade da ação climática e a importância da união para o tema.
Аз съм Симона Стилянова от България. През 2017 година започнах да търся начини да намалявам индивидуалния си отпечатък върху околната среда. През 2020 започнах да правя промени в бизнеса. Откакто съм част от Европейския климатичен пакт, търся и намирам решения за институционална и общностна промяна.
Yes, I think it's what I really like about the video. I've seen it before, of course, is I like to see how many different nationalities are represented there, and people make change in all different sort of ways. And I really think, it's just everyday, ordinary people like you and me that really go out there and try to make a best effort to bring about change. And if you add all of that onto each other, I think you have some pretty fundamental things happening there. And to me personally, that's also what today is about, right? Getting together in action and do it jointly. So I'm very happy that we are all here today in these numbers. I think it underlines the importance as well. Now, when I talk about the numbers and getting together, I actually also have a question that I right away want to ask to our audience, so to our online viewers and to the audience here. Please take out your phones, because we have a little Slido question for you that we want to ask. Because I'm really curious to hear from you where you are from, where you're tuning in from. So to the people here in the room, of course, you're all tuning in from Brussels, but it would be very nice to hear where you are originally from, for example. And then if you fill that all out, I think, we can perhaps get a nice representation of the diversity in the group here that we have with us. So maybe while you fill that out, we are in Brussels, in Belgium. Can I see some hands if people are from Belgium? Okay, those are some people, but not as much as I expected. Let's just quickly check my home country, the Netherlands. Can we see our Dutchies in the room? I see there. Give it up for the Dutchies. Now that's biased. People from Spain, for example. Okay, I see some hands coming in here at the very front. But we see Germany, Italy, a lot of people, Spain, Finland, France. I love collaboration is what somebody says. Me too, I love that answer. Thank you very much. Hungary, Harlingen, Friesland, Latvia, Austria. So I think India as well. So that's also nice to see that we have people outside of Europe tuning in with us as well. So it's great to see that many countries represented. Thank you all so much for filling it in. Because on a more serious note, we know that we as a society, and I think that's also what underlines the importance of today, we know that we are facing a lot of challenges, right? We know that we're dealing with the climate crisis, we have an energy crisis that is ongoing, we have biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, economic hardships, and the list goes on and on and on. And I think that now more than ever, we know that we have this narrowing time window to also take climate action. We have a narrowing time window to stay within 1.5 degrees of global warming. So we know that now that we are poised at the brink of the precipice. And therefore we also know that when we talk about together in action, when we talk about action, action more than ever is nothing less than a fundamental necessity that we need for our own survival. And I think that's at the core of all of the work that needs to be done. So alongside the energy crisis, alongside the war in Ukraine, alongside human rights violations that we see happening all over the world, now more than ever, we need to join into action together, and we need to jointly do that together. And luckily, some progress is surely but slowly being made, so that's a good thing to hear. We see from the EU side that in spring we will likely see the adoption of the Fit for 55 legislation, so that we can get concrete pathways as well on how we're going to reach our 2030 climate targets. On top of that, we also see that more activities ongoing on issues such as circular economies, nature restoration, food systems. So we see that there is a positive impact on the surge. And also when we look at our EU member states, right, we see change coming from cities, from communities, and from members of the European Climate Pact. So that's amazing to see, and I think a lot to build on for today. So one thing is clear, the European Union is at the forefront of climate action. And to learn more about this, I am very honored and excited to now welcome to the stage none other than Mr. Frans Timmermans, Executive Vice President of the European Commission for the Green Deal. Let's give it up. Good seeing you. Wilt u... Ja, graag. So, welcome Mr. Timmermans.
Thank you.
It's very good to have you here. Let's check indeed if the mic is working. Do we do the test round?
Is it on? Yes.
It is.
Hi, everyone.
So, Mr. Timmermans, I was just saying 2 years of the Climate Pact. Mm-hmm. How do you look at it? Why would you say that movements like the Pact are so important, especially in times like these?
Well, we didn't know it would be this success when we started it.
Right.
But we hoped for it because the climate crisis can only be addressed if we do the big things, which is addressing the polluters and making sure that all these big industries start reducing their emissions and move to a circular economy, etc. But it can only happen if there is strong popular support. There has to be a groundswell to do this. And the groundswell can only be organized if active people motivate others to do the same thing. Now, I've just come back from Latin America, and I had to give the clear message to our Brazilian friends, Colombian friends, that the fact that Europe no longer wants to be co-responsible for deforestation is not something that we thought up in offices in Brussels. It came from a groundswell of Europeans, consumers saying, I'm buying something, but I don't know if with my behavior I contribute to deforestation, and I want to be sure that I don't. So it's not a protectionist measure, it's something we want to do. And fortunately, the authorities of both Brazil and Colombia said to me, yes, let's work together on this, because we also don't want to contribute to this, but still it is happening. So it would not be happening, this fight against deforestation, if it wasn't a response to what European citizens want and what Brazilian citizens want in majority and what Colombian citizens want. So we would not be taking these measures if we were not being steered by a groundswell coming from the citizens, and the ambassadors are the ones channeling this best of all.
Yeah, I love how you said that. And I also like, right, how you emphasize that one cannot happen almost without the other. We need, people taking action irrespective of what we see in the industry and business, and we need them to, again, reply to what the people are demanding in that way. You mentioned this groundswell that is being caused. I also mentioned in the introduction, right, we are in very momentous times. We're dealing with a lot of crises. We know, how fast the clock is ticking as well. Does being in times of crises like these, does that urgency change what is needed from something like the EU Climate Pact?
It does. First of all, I saw when you did the Slido thing, I saw that there were also people from Ukraine following, and first and foremost, we have to express here today our full solidarity with the Ukrainian people who are fighting for their freedom, who are fighting for the independence of their country, and who are fighting for European values, including the fight against the climate crisis. They are committed to that, and they deserve our full solidarity. But now, answering your question. We are on a knife's edge, I believe, in our society because there's so many crises. There's a war on, there's a climate crisis, there's a threatening ecocide, we're in the middle of an industrial revolution. I believe, honestly, that we've let the differences within our society grow way too much. The difference between poor, middle-class people on the one hand and rich people has exploded, and it's no longer tenable. So these are the issues we need to address. And I see a lot of, discouragement, even depression with many of our young people at this stage who are afraid my generation is not aware enough of their problems, of their expectations for the future. So we're on a knife's edge, and and that could lead us to a situation of despair or a situation of just giving up because there's no point. And I need all you ambassadors to make sure that we don't give in to despair or discouragement. This can still be fixed. It's going to be hard, terribly hard to fix it, but it can still be fixed. And you ambassadors have an incredibly important role to say, we're committed, we're going to work on this, and we're going to fix it however difficult it is. If you don't do that, I don't know how we can reach out to all these people who are doubting whether we can fix it. And final comment I want to make on this. My biggest worry today is that we create an opposition between climate justice and social justice, whereas they are exactly the same phenomenon. Because the people who will suffer most in the climate crisis are the poorest people. Not rich people can find a way out. Poor people and middle-class people can't. So let's not fall into the trap of thinking that climate policy is only for the tofu-eating Tesla drivers. Climate policy is first and foremost for the people who have nowhere else to go than where they are, who need us to make sure there will be jobs for them in the future, there will be education for their children in the future, and they will be living in houses with affordable energy bills, not drafty houses, but clean houses, better housing. This is what we need to be doing. Offering them transport that is emission-free. These are the things we need to be doing. We need to understand that the social crisis and the climate crisis are two faces of the same coin.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I could have said it better than you have. Thank you so much. Yes, we can applaud for that. Yeah. And thank you. I think it's such a vital message because I'm a young person myself, and I mean it's very common, and I mean it's not just the case that we have terms being coined like climate anxiety, climate depressions amongst a lot of people, but amongst a lot of young people as well. I think it's a good point that we don't fall into despair, as you say, and I think there's this sort of active action that we need, and I think the thing about fear and being overwhelmed by the despair of it all is a very numbing feeling, and the last thing that we would need is for people to be numb in this crisis. So thank you so much for mentioning the importance of that as well. Turning to our audience, I can imagine that you're all as intrigued as I am to hear more about the Climate Pact, to hear more about the work that some of the ambassadors are doing specifically within this field. So it is with great joy that I would like to invite forward our next guests. First up, Filip Kopricina from Croatia, who is the founder of Energy Shift. Rada Boneva from Bulgaria, who has made it her personal mission to give green lifestyle tips through her blog Thrift Cheap. And last but definitely not least, all the way from Finland, we have Anu Harki, and Anu raises awareness on intergenerational efforts to tackle the climate crisis through her project, The Activist Granny. So can we get a big round of applause for them as well? Welcome. Great. So
Great to have a fellow grandparent on the stage.
on the board, wow.
Yeah, you can call me Gramps if you want to be called Granny.
Actually, you make it very tempting now for me to do that, Mr. Timmermans. But I will say, whether it's Gramps or Grannies, I think everyone here is very young at heart. I think that's also what counts, right? Hey,
I'm not ashamed of my age and of the fact and of the fact that I have 2 grandchildren. How many do you have? Do you have grandchildren? 4.
Oh, wow.
She beats me on that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is actually that is quite. Do we have more grandparents in the room with us? By the way, can I see some hands? Are there grandparents, or are people just too shy? I see some people of who I would suspect that they are grandparents, but of course I cannot point them out. Oh, some in the back. Yeah, I see some in the back. That is very nice. Hey, I'm very happy that you're all here with us today, because you are the people that are, actually doing the work and making sure that we have this action that is ongoing, each in your own way. Yeah, and I would love to hear more of it. So maybe, Philip, if I can turn to you first off. You do a lot of things. I mean, if anybody embodies action, I think it's you. You have been a part of environmental organizations such as Friends of the Earth. You've been trained as a green activist by the Green European Foundation. You're volunteering in a European Solidarity Corps project. And if that doesn't make you busy enough, you're also the founder of and CEO of Energy Shift. Can you maybe take us along with you, Philip, on what it is that you guys do?
I mean, that's not all that I'm doing. I'm doing much more.
Much more, guys, just so you know.
Advising UN, big oil companies sometimes, so yeah. But anyway, I'm Filip Kuperčina from Croatia, and I'm the founder and CEO of Energy Shift. Energy Shift is a web-based, blockchain-powered platform that enables citizens to jointly invest in and co-own solar farms. Thus, we democratize the energy sector and enable citizens to actively participate in the energy transition to renewables. Basically, you can invest in renewable energy, you can do good for the environment, and you can make money in the same time. Currently, we have more than 2,000 registered European citizens who made soft commitment to invest in renewable energy, and we have a total investment potential of more than 22 million euros for investment in solar energy projects. I've also received other European awards, such as being during the EU Sustainable Energy Week. I was awarded from the European Commission the Young Energy Trailblazer Award in 2021. And last year, I was also featured as a Forbes 30 Under 30 for Europe. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the European Union, the European Union institutions, everyone working there who is pushing forward the climate change and the initiatives that are springing out of the EU, such as Fit for 55 package, the Repower EU, that is basically also creating a market for me, but and the need for us, but also pushing forward to meet our goals. And to sum up, I would like to leave you with one quote. Of course, it's rephrased from Mahatma Gandhi, and I would rephrase it and say that we should invest in the change we want to see in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. Can we get a big round of applause for Philip as well, indeed? Philip, can I just say, I love how you don't push it under the rug, that a market is being created indeed for you through Repower Europe. But I think that's a good thing. We need to, make sure that we shrink those industries and sectors that need shrinking, and we grow those that are sustainable and need to grow. I also want to remind our audience, if there is any question that you want to ask to Philip or any of the other panelists later on, you can do so via Slido, so to our online audience, but also to everyone here in the room. Pull out your phone if you want, and make sure to submit any questions you have. Now, Philip, you thanked the EVP. You even told him that he's creating work for you. Is there any question maybe you might have for him as well?
Yes, and it's also related to the energy transition. For example, countries like China, Russia, they all have critical resources that we need. And we do need cobalt, lithium, some other various elements that are not found in the European Union. Some of those are really critical for the energy transition, for batteries, and even for solar panels. Like silicon is really abundant, but 75% of polysilicon production comes from China. So how is the EU working on addressing this, or what is the EU's strategy on how we can basically secure all the necessary materials, raw materials, or the knowledge, or even the inputs needed to actually make the energy transition to renewables.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a fascinating question because this is the area, energy transition, where what we were talking about earlier, poverty and climate come together. Because most of the people who are not that well off in Europe live in the most drafty houses, have the highest energy bill, especially in relationship to their income. And if you could provide those people with solar panels and heat pumps, you would change their lives. It might make the difference between being able to buy new shoes for your kids or not, simply because you massively reduce the energy bills. And at the same time, you reduce emissions. Now, what we need to do first and foremost is to invest in technological innovation. You know that we're already almost there, that we can make all of a solar panel recyclable. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. That's first. Secondly, all these critical materials, if we recycle products, we reduce enormously the demand for these critical materials. If we were to recycle all the cell phones that are no longer used, we would not need some of the critical materials we're now looking for to make new cell phones. So also recycling has to become an element. Repairability also, well, with solar panels might be slightly more difficult, but heat pumps, etc., other products we use that need these critical materials should be better repairable. That's why we're making legislation to make that happen. We need to go back to understanding that we need to stop with this dig up, make, use, throw away economy. That's a really important issue. And then if we still need these critical materials, we need to enter into partnerships with countries that we need to work with. In Latin America, in our neighborhood, Ukraine was I mentioned before, it has many of the critical materials we need. We should build economic biotopes with them. And Latin America and in Africa, so that we spread the responsibility on a global scale. But we cannot achieve this without recycling. We need to create the circular economy because the critical materials are finite even if we have new partnerships. By the way, we're also discovering critical materials in Europe all the time, recently in Norway and in Sweden. So there's still stuff we have ourselves, but we need to make sure we don't cause more trouble by using that for our natural environment than necessary. So recycling, recycling, recycling is very important.
Right. Thank you so much. Maybe you want to respond, Philip?
Yeah, it's really something, Recycling, especially of solar panels, it's also difficult, but I'm finding companies that are actually starting to do that and developing technology, so.
Yeah.
Indeed, and most of these companies are in Europe. And apart from Europe, I also said when I was in Latin America last week, why don't you make your own solar panels? Why is 90% of the market coming from China? Why are we not diversifying this? There's no reason why. The technology is available, the investments will be available because the demands for solar panels globally will explode, and it leads to better jobs, to better paying jobs. I heard, for instance, in South Africa, youth unemployment 66%. Look at what you could do if you could bring some of those production methods to those countries. We will need so many heat pumps, so many wind turbines, and all of that needs to be made. And it can be made, it doesn't have to be made exclusively in Europe. We need to keep an open economy. We need to keep an open eye for the needs of Africa and Latin America. Let's work together.
Yeah, quite clear. Touching upon what you just said as well, Philip, there's a question for you in the chat from Lorenzo, and he's asking, what is the state of your investments in solar? Have you already got some operative solar farms?
Yeah, we have a huge pipeline of projects, but we are currently fundraising to meet the regulatory requirements because we want to open it to the whole European Union, but country per country require different conditions and different requirements for the same licenses needed to operate. So we are on the process of fundraising to meet all of those demands and to pay for lawyers because they're expensive.
Yeah, as you said.
And he's mentioning one of the biggest bottlenecks that we are causing, we at the European level, but also at the national level, subnational level, permitting. Permitting is much too slow. We really need to speed that up. And we've taken an initiative as European Commission on that, but we will also need the member states to come along with that. There is a push in the member states, but it still needs to be done much more quickly. And let's try and do it in a uniform way across the European Union, so that when you request a permit, you can use one permit under the same conditions in all member states. That would make your life a lot easier. Yeah. And it would make the energy transition a lot faster.
Yeah. Hey, and Mr. Timmermans, if I listen to you and if my microphone is also listening to me, I hear you mentioning a couple of things, right? So on the one hand, you sort of, like the permitting example you just gave, that is about speeding up the process, right? We need the sort of faster action and maybe a little bit less of the bureaucracy that might sometimes obstruct it. You mentioned diversifying, which is also an important element. There's another question coming from our audience, and they are asking, how will the EU move faster on adaptation and also globally at the next COP28 on the global goal of adaptation? So what are some of the things that we can do specifically within that field?
Well, first of all, we need to make sure that the major emitters, so you look at the G20, G20 is responsible for 80% of global emissions. And whatever we do in adaptation has no effect if we don't drastically reduce our emissions, because then the temperature will rise so fast and the weather patterns will become so erratic that we will cross a number of tipping points, and then no amount of adaptation will help us. Right. So first and foremost, we need major emitters to commit to reducing their emissions more. We're doing that. We are going to push our partners, especially, we're responsible for 7 to 8% of global emissions, but it's very important that global emitters such as China, responsible for 30% of global emissions, really comes out with a commitment to reducing their emissions. If we do that, then we also have more credibility to those countries who are almost responsible for nothing in terms of emissions, but suffer most from the consequences of a climate crisis. And they're asking for an enhanced effort on adaptation. Yeah. And we should be bringing that as well, which means that we will finally do what we promised, that's bring the $100 billion to the table yearly. Yeah. Again, I have to say the European Union is doing its part, is actually doing slightly more than its part, but I still call upon our member states to see if they can do more, but especially we need to convince our American friends to also come to the table with their share, which they haven't done yet. And we should also address this with other countries that are still hiding behind the status of developing country, but they're no longer developing countries. They're thinking about the Arab world, but also China and others. Yeah. And then we, as European Union, we were able to forge a compromise at COP27 on a new fund for loss and damage. And also there we need to put a lot of effort. It's one of the reasons I'm traveling now to our partners across the world, that we come together on a plan to make this loss and damage effort concrete. So how are we going to make sure we change the international financial architecture so that it becomes more easier for poor countries to access international financing? How do we increase the possibility for those countries who don't have the capacity to get access to data that could give them early warning when there's a cyclone coming or a hurricane coming? How can we get the funds together so that they can finance the adaptation? I was speaking to the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, and she said every time we have an incident, a hurricane, I have to rebuild my country. And every time I have to take out loans to rebuild what was already there. So I can't invest. I can't move forward because I'm just rebuilding every time. And I'm being told, take out loans, take out loans. That's not sustainable. And this is even a mid-income country. Just imagine if you're talking about really poor countries in what desperate situation they are. So also here, we need to do more as a global community to make adaptation and loss and damage something that the Global South can believe in, because today they're not sure whether we're serious about this. So we have 1 year until December to prove that we're serious about this.
Right, and that we're going to come from a climate justice perspective also from that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Philip, also thank you for sharing your story. Now, some of the things that have been mentioned, in your story, you've touched upon it as well, Mr. Timmermans, is really these crises. But of course, we don't need action to just be spurred on by crises, but it can also, start from a lifestyle change level, for example. And that brings me to our second ambassador for this panel. For that, I turn to you, Rada. Welcome. Good to have you. To everyone in the room, I must say I follow Rada on Instagram. If you don't already, make sure to follow her on Instagram. She has amazing content. You also have your blog, Thrift Cheap, through which you really show people in an easy and accessible way how they can make changes in their lives to make sure that they have a more greener lifestyle. So maybe, Rada, if I can ask you, can you maybe take us along with you? Why and how did you sort of start Thrift Cheap, your blog, and where did that sort of come from?
Is it working? Yeah. Hello. Thank you for the shout out. All of the work I do, it's in Bulgarian, so unfortunately, not many people would understand. I'm Rada. I'm a Climate Pact Ambassador from Bulgaria. I started in 2017 a blog called Thrift Cheap, which is a word game between a thrift shop and my favorite animal. But if everything stayed the same since then, believe me, I would not have been here today. Because I was writing not only because this is how I express myself, but because I started it all because there was an urgent need to fight some stereotypes in my home country regarding owning pre-loved things and buying second-hand and giving second chance to material stuff. But at the same time, I didn't have put much into the environmental aspect of textile and fashion. It was more of a finding your style, being on a budget, stuff like that. I was making fun of my classmates for buying fast fashion for €5 every week, but in fact I was doing almost the same thing because never mind, if your wardrobe is 99% secondhand, if you do it regularly, you can still be stimulating overconsumption in your everyday life. Yeah. And this is a never-ending cycle because you buy it because somebody else would get it because there's one pair of it and it's €1 or whatever. And then I learned about the zero waste philosophy and started the challenge Plastic Free July. But I was I was tempted because I didn't get the reduce, reuse, recycle message at first. I was thinking, okay, I would not buy anything and I would not generate waste. I would not use cosmetics because it would generate waste. It was all wrong. It took me quite some time to figure out that environmental lifestyle, it's not only focusing about the packaging, and it's way far more behind the straws and the bags. And it's more about the overall awareness and the impact of plastic and fossil fuels, the health issues, the pollution, the air pollution, the sound pollution, and the aspects of our health as well, and the everything that goes with it. So it was a real eye-opener that I made a challenge and asked people to list 3 things that they already do to reduce the waste in their lives, and 3 things that they're promising to do back in 2019. And I was amazed that so many people were advanced and so many other people are taking the baby steps. And we should not judge them and we should not make fun of them, but educate, to give positive example, to adopt all these things. And this is a long journey, as I said. Yeah. And this is why I became a Climate Pact Ambassador. My main goal is to talk about all these environmental topics in my mother language because this is a need in Bulgaria. But in fact, also connecting to people, giving a positive example, and it's never too late to change, and it's never too late to educate yourself and maybe start something bigger on your local or national or maybe international level.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. I also like how you say, right, that you sort of ask people what are the things that you already did that you're going to do, and you see this big difference between some people taking really small actions and others coming up with bigger things. And I like how you said that there should be room for that, and everybody has a different starting point. I think that's important because sometimes I also speak to people, and I feel like sometimes people are intimidated by this notion that if they want to make sustainable lifestyle choices, they have to be perfect from the get-go, or it's going to be, or they are hypocrites, and it's not allowed for them to do that. But it takes time to become the tofu-eating Tesla driver, as Mr. Timmermans called it. Just kidding. Hey, Radha, I can imagine, in all the work that you do and from your expertise and background, is there any question you want to ask Mr. Timmermans?
I was thinking about what I can ask him at this moment, because what is the common thing between the pact and the institution we are in? It's the individuals and us as consumers. The ecological theme is everywhere nowadays, and some businesses are taking advantage of it. Maybe some are too much. And how the EU is going to reduce the false claims on businesses and maybe encourage the transparency in business and fighting the so-called greenwashing?
There are almost endless false claims today. And we need to develop legislation to wash them out. And that's what we're doing. So there's a couple of things we need to do. First of all, to make sure that companies cannot make false claims, and if they make them, they get punished for it. Secondly, what we need to do is to create a system that consumers can relate to because they understand it, because it's logical and recognizable, because there's dozens of different sorts of false claims, sometimes also even genuine claims, but are so different that people get lost when they're trying to make the right choice. I want to be able to say to Europeans, for instance, don't want to buy products that contribute to deforestation. We have to be able to say to them, this product did not contribute to deforestation. And so we need to have that legislation in place, and we're working on that. And we also have to make it interesting for producers to be on the right side here, because producers don't want to be shamed into doing things. They want to move forward. That's why they're also making sometimes these false claims, because they want to create a good image. So we need to work with them as well, and that's also what we're doing, seeing what is possible and what the limits are of possibility. We need to do a lot of work on packaging. We're doing that as well. Some is easy. I remember years ago when we started with the packaging, some producers were saying, no, we can't do this because the consumer wants this specific color and we can only do it, etc. That's nonsense. It wasn't even true. If you tell to consumers, you're not going to have this very bright green bottle anymore, it's going to be slightly different color, but it's then completely recyclable, this is something consumers do subscribe to. So, take consumers also seriously in all of this. But, the problem is confusing them is a business model. Confusing them is a business model. And we need to wash that out. There should be no confusion. It should be clear what is sustainable and what isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I hear that, that's also about the transparency that consumers then get. Is that something that you... that is familiar to you? Do you hear that consumers really find it frustrating indeed that they don't have that full transparency?
Yeah, this is a common thing, and every day people ask me, Radha, what is that? Is this greenwashing? Is this true? What does this mean? What does this label mean? What does this claim mean?
Right.
There's so many information, so many things going on that they get lost.
It's hard to see.
If it's easier for them to follow the path, and okay, this is eco. This is the official eco definition. What is eco?
Yeah, what does it mean? Yeah, it's yeah. I think you said it nicely when you said that confusing them has indeed become a business model. To our audience, if there are any questions that you want to ask to Rada, do let us know via the Slido in between. I see indeed that there is already highlighted one. Somebody's asking, what would be your advice to someone that wants to start something similar to you in their own community?
Your own community.
Yeah. It's a good question. So you have the Bulgarian content, Rada?
Yeah, speaking from my experience, there was the niche that I felt comfortable. And even if you're not a climate content creator or a blogger, you should find your own niche. Find what you're passionate about. You see, it was a fashion blog. It was not a climate blog, but where are we now?
Where are we now? Right on stage here in front of all these people.
I'm honored. You should find what you're passionate about and speak from your heart.
Yeah.
And follow your intuition, and things will happen.
Yeah, yeah, and I like how you say that, right? It's not that climate action in itself is this standalone thing that you work on and you do something with that within your community. No, you are somebody that's interested in fashion and you try to incorporate into that. Philip is somebody that does a lot with energy, and then you try to incorporate it in that. Anu, I don't want to spoil actually what you do because we'll get to you in a bit, but I really like how you said it. Find what you love and then try to see how you can make sure that what you're doing is going to become more sustainable in that sense. Hey, before we go over to you, Anu, I'm actually curious because Rada, you spoke a lot about like these lifestyle implications. We have a little Slido, and I would be curious to hear from the audience if they could tell us if they have been making any greener lifestyle changes lately, so as of recently. So while you fill that out, maybe if I go to you guys, Anu, have you guys recently made any lifestyle changes?
I mean, my mother taught me since 2000, 2005 that we should recycle. So we've been recycling even long before it was sexy, before it was mainstream. We have been doing it. Of course, now it's much easier to find recycling bins, specifically for plastics, for glass, for paper, but we have been doing it for years.
Right.
So I think also education has a really important part in it.
To take in it, yeah, but you did it before it was cool. That is quite nice. Anu?
Yes, actually, me and my husband does this. Do you hear me?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, we changed our diet many years ago. No red meat, no milk products.
Nice.
Now, this year, we have downsized our house. And of course, we are saving a lot of energy. We consume much less. You know, being this old, you have clothes for the rest of your life.
I see actually a potential partnership. Clothes for the rest of your life, fashion blogging, maybe some collab happening here. In the meantime, I see that you filled it out. 60% of people are making small changes each day. That's really impressive. That's really nice to see. Yes, lots. Not yet, but I plan to is 5%. Of course, I love that we did not include an option saying no, and I will not. Because, of course, how dare you? No, but thank you so much for filling that out. Anu, I think you must have sparked curiosity from the room, so I would really like to go over to you, because now we've heard from Philip, we've heard from Rada, two relatively young people. As I said earlier, I feel like you're very young at heart, but through your own project, Activist Grannies, you also do a lot of, you do a lot on this intergenerational importance as well when we talk about climate action. So if I could ask you, I'm really curious, maybe could you take us along how you started, and also maybe like what the importance really of this intergenerational collaboration is to you personally?
Yes, thank you, Hazar, for your presentation, and welcome everyone. It's a good opportunity to be here. All my granny friends are looking at this now. So
okay, then we'll say hi to...
Yeah, that's why Finland was so big there. But we have a very common saying, a phrase in Finland, forward set granny in the snow. And what does it actually mean? It means that if there's... Grannies are actually spunky. They have guts, they have lived so long, and if something really has to be done, grannies do it. And it's a good phrase, and we use it a lot. And myself, I started my climate activism when I retired in 2016. And just to have some tools, I joined Vice President Al Gore's climate training in Florida. And I have given numerous presentations, climate presentations in Finland since that for more than 5 years. And in those presentations, I have actually learned that especially old people have very biased or false understanding of climate change. They are not really worried, they are kind of interested. And for that reason, I think that it's very important that every citizen knows what the humanity will experience if we lack reacting. If we lack changing our lifestyle, if we don't change our mindset as to who we really are, just one species living on this beautiful planet. And our children nowadays, that's why grannies react. They grow in a world with really a lot of frightening news every day. And future, it looks grim if we don't do anything. So that's why grannies are worried and they want to do something. Then, end of 2019, 12 grannies in Finland founded a movement called Activist Grannies. We are now 6,500 grannies, granddads, and granny-minded people in this group, and we are doing a lot already for 3 years. The point is that we are old. For example, myself, I've been born in the beginning of 1950s, just a couple of years after the Second World War. All founding grannies have been born in 1950s. We are old. We have lived both good and bad times. And we think that time gives you ability to put things in a good order. It gives you resilience. And we know that a rewarding life doesn't need excessive consumption. Much more important is friends, nature, and culture. And this is something we are talking about. In our seminars, we try to give real science-based understanding of what climate change is. And we try to create the positive feeling what you can do. Actually, everybody can do something. So we haven't lost the case. We try to be positive. We spread our ideas through various channels in seminars and campaigns, also with other climate activists. And really this picture is part of an international campaign called Protect Our Winters. We are participating in that now in Finland. And this picture is actually drawn by one of the founding members of Activist Grannies. Old people don't have very many possibilities to discuss these things and learn new information and practices. We think that we may have given them a way to learn more, to understand climate change, and do something about it when they are discussing we are in our Facebook group actually discussing many ways how you can react. You can actually buy quality garment and it lasts for decades rather than a year. You can recycle, you can change your diet, and you can support public transport, very easy things for an old people to do. And we have a big group now doing all these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anu, for sharing that with us. And I love how you said a rewarding life doesn't need excessive consumption. Thank you so much for sharing that message. I think it's a really important one to be heard. Hey, Anu, with all the work that you do and all the activism and the importance and how you do it jointly, you know, from that expertise, is there anything you would like to ask Mr. Timmermans, anything you would like to share from that perspective?
Yes, definitely. I would have like 10 or 15 questions, but the most important comes here. Activist Grannies, we have a seminar next Monday on the 6th.
Are you available?
No, you don't have to fly there. But we have a seminar for the MPs in the Finnish Parliament. We have 6 members of the largest parliament parties participating to that seminar, and we asking them questions basically about energy issues and also biodiversity issues. And most important thing for us now is biodiversity in Finland. Finland is a forest-based country. We have a very strong forest industry, and the discussion around protecting part of the Finnish forest is very controversial. It has been so for many years. And now we have parliamentary elections in April. And actually, all the parties are just talking about economics. And we wish them to talk about climate as well. That's why we have this seminar and this panel. And my question to you, Mr. Timmermans, is biodiversity and loss of it. We have a very worrying sinking of Finnish forest carbon sinks during the 3 years. It just came out last summer, and that's of course because the very heavy logging. We are one of the countries in Finland with least protected forests, 6.9%. It's much less than most of the other countries. And because of the heavy forest industry, it's a very difficult question for the MPs. And my question goes, what message would you, Vice President Timmermans, take to the Finnish Parliament MPs regarding the future protection of state-owned old-growth forests?
Intriguing question. Because when I go to Finland and Sweden and I want to talk about forests and express my worries about the state of the forests, the reaction I get are very angry. You're a Dutchman, what do you know about forests? We've been taking care of forests for generations. You're a Dutchman, you know every tree in the Netherlands by name individually. That's how many you have. So, you know, the risk I run is when I come and say, you know, you need to look after biodiversity, you're planting too many of the same trees, you're doing too much clear cutting, all of that, the message doesn't really arrive because, I mean, you know, it's, as a Dutchman, I would feel perhaps the same if somebody from Sweden would come and tell us how to do water management. You say, well, that's what we've been doing for centuries, don't come and lecture us. So I have to be very sensitive to that issue. So that what I say, especially in Finland, is listen to your scientists. Finland has an incredibly competent council of scientists who study this subject. Don't take my word for it, but take your scientists seriously. You have appointed them to that council. Then you have to listen to their advice. And their advice is clear because the situation is alarming. So don't take a Dutchman's word for it. Listen to your own scientists. That would be my message to the Finnish Parliament.
Great. Is that something you can move forward with, Anu? Great. Okay, so that's probably something you can move forward with, hopefully.
I definitely can. Thank you.
Amazing. If I might add to that, maybe you should also say to them, forward, set granny in the snow, and just, get the action going a bit more on that biodiversity. Hey, there are also some questions coming in through the chat. I think we have time for one quick audience question. And the top voted, selected one I see is, what is the top climate-related measure you plan on working for this year? What is the one action you wish ambassadors were gathering behind? I take it that this question is most probably for you, Mr. Timmermans.
Well, first of all, just want to inform the ambassadors and the audience that we need to make sure COP28 in Dubai is a success. And a lot of work I will be doing this year is to create enough international momentum, to create enough alliances, to build bridges between the North and the South, that we don't end up with another confrontation between the North and the South, and that we get major emitters to really reduce their emissions and come up with plans to reduce their emissions. Now, the one action I would wish ambassadors would gather behind is the action that will help us inform consumers better of their choices. So what we were talking about earlier, labeling, reducing packaging. But if there's one thing I could leave you with, there will be those who will try and undermine your credibility by pointing to the inconsistencies in your own behavior. This is the oldest trick in the book. But, we are humans. We are inconsistent by nature. And the fact that you're inconsistent does not mean that what you're doing in the right moment isn't the right move. And never be discouraged. Even small steps will take you to your goal. And the first small step will take you to a bigger step, and then an ever bigger step, and more people will start following you. And that if you digress from that path for a moment, okay, accept that. We all have our weaknesses. But don't then, step away from the path. Step back on the path and go forward. We are all inconsistent. We all have things to learn. We all know that we are far, far from where we need to be, but every single step is a good step. And, just encourage people. Make sure nobody falls in despair. That is my biggest ask of the ambassadors today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, and maybe if I do one more quick rapid fire round with the ambassadors in the same light, and maybe in the same light of that question, if you would look forward to like the next 5 to 10 years of the European Climate Pact ambassadorship, what are your hopes for the upcoming 5 to 10 years, for example? Just very briefly. Philip, would you like to go first?
Sure. I would like to see more action, either, from people like Anu, from organizations like hers, people starting their own initiatives, because you should just start it. And I think we should also understand the motivation behind why grannies are supporting climate change, because most of our business leaders right now are in the 50s or 60s. Most of the CEOs, most of the politicians are in that age range, so I think understanding the motivation behind their action could actually help us motivate our leaders of today to have also an action there.
Thank you so much. Rada, what would be your hope or wishes for the near future?
I always say that I wish more people, I think that we have lost our connection with food and with nature, and if more of us understand the line of everything around us comes from, we will consume more consciously. We would look at the surrounding with a different point of view.
Right. Yep.
And this is a big change that impacts on your everyday life, in your business, in your strategies,
that is
and everything.
Yeah. Anu?
Yes, thank you. We have a couple of million grown-ups in Finland, and they all vote. I hope that they are all activist grannies in 5 years, and they all vote for the Green Party, and then we have only one party.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's quite clear.
Can I also do some party political broadcasting?
I think I'm going to end it right here, guys. That takes us
but I want to pick up on a point he made, because it's so important. Willy Brandt, who's a politician from the political family I belong to, said at one point, positive societal change is very often the product of an alliance between grandparents and grandchildren. And I think there is a lot of truth in this, because I'm a grandfather, but I'm still in the group that is in charge of things, and people that are in charge of things on a daily basis tend to be focused on their immediate, it's like walking and you're just looking at the next step. Whereas grandparents have the freedom to look back and to look forward on a wider panorama. And young people are just looking forward and are wondering, what world will I have when I reach a situation that I have responsibility? And that's where this alliance can get us in the middle under enough pressure to do the right thing. Because we're not doing the right thing now, and we need to start doing it immediately.
Thank you so much. Thank you indeed. Can we have a round of applause for that? Well, everybody, that does unfortunately already take us to the end of this showcase with our ambassadors. Now, I can imagine that your hands are itching to take action after hearing all of that, all that wisdom, all those insights. If you look at your badge, actually, and if you flip it around, you will see that there is a QR code on the back. Actually, if you scan that, you will be able to make a climate pledge yourself. So feel free to do so if you want to. We have a little coffee break now in the foyer, so make sure to check that out. You can also check out the Count Us In platform to see what sort of small steps you can take moving forward. And in the next 20 minutes in the foyer, you can get some coffee, some refreshments, and you can visit stands from the EU Covenant of Mayors, the Committee of Regions, Climate Fresk, EU Pledging Schemes for Sustainable Business, the EU Eco-Label, and of course the EU Climate Pact itself, where you can make a pledge if you haven't already. Now with that being said, we'll be back here at 15:25 sharp, and I want to thank you all for joining in today. So a big round of applause for yourself. Thank you. Thank you so much, Philippe. Thank you so much, Anu. That was so lovely and amazing. Hello? Sorry guys, one last question. Can I ask all the Climate Pact ambassadors to stay in the room with us, because we're going to take a group picture with the Executive Vice President. All others, go enjoy your coffee break. Whew, I almost forgot. van jou? Wil je die zo meenemen of nu? Yeah, I will. Okay, everybody, I see that you're walking in. Please come in, come forward and have a seat, and we can start this second segment of the afternoon. I see some more people coming in. Please do join us. I can imagine that you've had interesting conversations during the coffee break that we had, but unfortunately I will ask you to cut them short for now, but don't worry, there will be plenty of time after today's afternoon program to continue your conversations. Now, it's great to see you all again. I hope that we're all recaffeinated a little bit again and ready to go into this second segment. Now, before we do, I just want to get you all warmed up again. So I want to start off with a little Slido question. So if everybody can get their phones out. I am curious, in that short break that we had, to hear from people whether they have already made a climate pledge. Okay, so the answers that you can give is yes, I made one today, yes, a long time ago, or no, but I'll be making one soon. As you see, there is a recurring trend, and that is that no is not an answer. A definite no, still not included. But I see that a lot of people are planning to make a climate pledge soon. That is exciting to hear. It's also exciting to hear that the second largest group has made some pledges a long time ago. So it's good to see that you've been doing this way before it was cool, as Philip said in the previous panel. So that's great to see. Now, as you fill that out, we'll see how many more people will be making commitments soon. But with that being said, let's also dive deep into this next segment for today, because we've already established, right, that today is all about joining together in action. And we need to do that in all walks of life, at all different levels, to make sure that each one of us is making steps in our own work, in our own communities for climate action. So whether that is from sports clubs to city administration to grassroots organizations, we need action at all those levels. And that is all about what this next panel will be about. So for this next panel, we'll be talking about connecting our worlds. How can citizens, communities, cities, and regions team up for climate action? Now, to have that conversation with us, we have a panel of stellar minds in our midst. So it brings me great joy to invite forward the following people. Kata Tuto, who is the Deputy Mayor of Budapest, European Climate Pact Ambassador representing the European Committee of Regions in Hungary. Can we get a big round of applause for Kata? Welcome. It's good having you here. Feel free to sit anywhere. Then we have Morten Thorsby from Norway, who is a football player for Union Berlin and the Norwegian national team. And he is also the founder of We Play Green, an organization mobilizing the football community for climate action. Morten, it's good to have you as well. Oh, you can, yeah, that's great, actually. Then we have Marta Vandlova, who is from Slovakia, and she is a role model for young climate activists. Very happy to have you here as well, Marta. Nice having you. And last but definitely not least, we have with us Frans Timmermans, who is an active ambassador and Climate Pact coordinator for Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. Frans, so good seeing you. Come sit down, guys. Very happy to have you here in our midst. It's great seeing you. You've been listening in on the conversation for a little bit. How have you been experiencing it? Maybe, Frans, as a first reaction so far?
Really overwhelming, but that's because I've worked so intensely over the last years. Mm-hmm. So all the words and all the perspective from so many ambassadors and high-level officials resonate with me. Yeah. Because I've been supporting all of those fantastic people. Yeah. So I'm really positive, but I'm also hearing some strategic objectives. So that makes me also excited. For instance, with COP28, how relevant ambassadors that also have ties with the UN or with other strategic countries to really leverage that, because our citizens can lobby and can lobby along with politicians, because it is something that we all care for, and it's not only the responsibility from politics. actually we've seen with the previous generations that they did not act enough, and that our generation is also responsible to fix it in the coming decades.
Make sure that we pass that responsibility back up and take it ourselves. Thank you so much. Thank you for those reflections. And I can imagine, considering that you're a Pact community leader as well, that it's quite grand to see everyone here coming together, joined in joint efforts. Hey, this panel and conversation is really about bringing all these different levels of actions together. Kata, if I may start with you. You are the deputy mayor as well of Budapest. Could you tell us a bit more about how it is that you drive climate action at your local level?
Oh, yes, I have many hats. So partly is I'm deputy mayor of Budapest. I'm responsible for waste and water and wastewater and district heating, everything that relates to all of our actions. But my other hat is I am a member of the Committee of the Regions. We say this is a body which is the voice of the cities and regions. So we are usually sitting here where you sit with a lot of mayors all over Europe and try to find our ways and try to find this green door and enter this green door. It's not an easy thing. So I think in the past 2 years, this community, for me, the mayors community, the Climate Pact, the Covenant of Mayors, it really helped because on the day-to-day struggle, especially in this energy crisis, when it's not about what should we build, but okay, what are we cutting down and who are we taking away and what are we taking away? Keeping your focus on your climate pledges, it's not an easy thing. I usually have this analogy for democracy, but climate engagement is also like a marriage. So you don't take it for granted. You work for it every single day. It's not just you once pledge that you're doing this. You have to work every day because it's not forever if you don't do it and don't keep it in your mind.
Oh, I like how you say it. It's like marriage. That's definitely something that can resonate with it. So that joint effort every day that we need to keep in investing. Hey, and you speak about some of the obstacles that you guys face then as well. But could you give us some concrete examples and whether that's indeed from your work as a deputy mayor or through this joint effort?
Sure. We have many things. We do the mitigation part. So we have all these pledges on reducing carbon emissions and have a lot of renewables. But also we have the circular economy. So we decided a long time ago that we will increase recycling and reduce waste burning. What's happening in this energy crisis? Well, it's not just Budapest, but all of our cities are putting all of the waste to the incinerators to produce heat and electricity.
Right.
And now a lot of cities are planning to build more incinerators. And we say that you have to keep on track because what will you burn in 20 years? We want all this plastic out of the bins. It will be only the watermelons left in the bins, hopefully. So you have to keep with it. We've done a lot. I mean, the energy crisis, for one part, pushed some actions because we saved a lot of energy. Everybody was turning off the heating and tried to reduce gas emissions. But I see cities thinking really strategically. So it's not just turning off for a while.
Right.
Had a very mild winter. But I see like Vienna pledging to reduce gas consumption to 0 in the city and put every household into district heating and get heat pumps and use wastewater heat and find many, it's not just about solar panels, so find many ways, but about the communities, because what I see is, yes, if you have an ambitious mayor, I think that's a great thing, because then you can leap.
Right. So that really helps with making that.
If you don't bring in the community, so if you don't bring in your citizens in this action, and every small action engages your citizens, if you don't do that, that mayor will not be elected maybe one day. And then if the community is not engaged, maybe all the actions will vanish. But the citizens, you will not change at elections. So if your citizens are in for the climate action, if they're engaged to climate action, it doesn't matter how little and how small, then they won't elect somebody who says that this is all bullshit and you don't have to.
Right. I like how you say that indeed, right? Because they are the constant factor. They're what makes the city. So indeed, the longevity of their role is really an important element in that. Thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting. In the meantime, also to our audience, if there is any question at any point that you want to pose to one of our panelists, please scan the QR code to join in on Slido again, and then I'll promise to do my best to pose as many of those questions as possible. That being said, Morten, if I could move to you. You started We Play Green, so really focusing on how we can mobilize the football community to take more climate action. I'm really intrigued and really curious. Can you maybe take us along on how that journey sort of started for you?
Yeah, so my journey actually started back in 2014, just before the climate or Paris Agreement, and back then I was 17 years old. I lived in Holland, actually, in Friesland. So I just moved from Norway. I was bought by Heerenveen, a club in Holland, and suddenly I was in a, Heerenveen is a small farmer village, and you know where it is. It's very small. There's nothing to do. Yeah. So I started to read a lot, and I think I was in a period where a lot of, I think, other young people also feel they're getting very overwhelmed by, all these things, that I suddenly start to realize that we're having this huge planetary crisis, and there's absolutely nothing that's being done about it. Yeah. And especially in the world what I was in football, there was not a single individual who was talking about this. That's still very few people who's talking about it this day, but there's happened a lot the last 8 years. But that got me, that made me, I couldn't understand how it's possible that we're having this crisis and nobody's speaking about it, and everybody's walking around like everything is normal, which is, I think, the exact feeling a lot of young people through Europe and the world is feeling today. So I had kind of I had a depression, and I was actually considering quitting football at the moment. I was then 19 years old. I was playing professionally, and I was really considering, is it worth continuing, doing such an egoistic and project like this when we're having all these huge problems and challenges that has to be solved. So I had to have a little family board coming down at my house, and we had that actually evening where it was like, what should I do? I really don't want to do this anymore. And then I think I got the best advice someone ever has given me, and that was my father, who told me that, Morten, you should continue to play football and use your voice to speak about these issues, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And I've just realized the extreme power of your extreme influence that I have because I'm a football player, and we can ask ourselves, is that right or wrong? But that's, in the end, that doesn't matter. That's just how our society is these days. And if you look at the most influential people in the 18th centuries, there was scientists, there was politicians, and today there's just scientists, politicians, some movie star basketball players, and then you have football players up here.
At the very top.
So, I mean, it's incredible to see the impact and reach they have. I mean, the football family is the biggest, or football is the biggest social phenomenon in the world, reaching out to more than 5 billion people. Cross-cultural, religious, it's one of the few social phenomena that we have that's really connecting everyone on the whole planet. And I really do believe if we're able to activate the global football family in supporting the green transition, I really do believe we can save the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've all sort of witnessed that, right? Coming out of World Cup and seeing what sort of a massive shock that has made through society. And whether it's about the societal discussions we had or whether it was about the actual games, it's, as you say, right? It's there at the very top and it generates so much attention. Now, Morten, if I can ask you, you said that at some point when you were in the very serene environment of Heerenveen, indeed, that got you to read a lot about climate. It was very overwhelming, as you said. But you also mentioned that at some point you considered to quit. Now, that makes me curious. Did you consider quitting because you wanted to dedicate as much as your time as you could to climate action? Or did you consider quitting because you thought that climate action and the football world cannot coincide?
Well, yeah, first of all, I had the first period, I think that was what Frans was speaking about earlier. That was kind of the phase of, giving up. I mean, you're just realizing, oh, we're having these huge problems. Nobody's speaking about this. Like, it was really tough. And then those feelings kind of turned into, that engagement and that, the will to actually do something, which I really totally agree with Frans. That's exactly what we need now. We need engaged. We need more engaged people. That is what we need. And then, of course, my father opened my mind to try to understand the potential that lays in football.
Right.
And what I realized is, of course, the potential in football, but maybe the most I realized the potential in player activism or athlete activism, which I'm fighting for and which my foundation is really trying to help with, help football players to activate their voices. Because I truly believe that activists and, their or the players can be made activists. They're not born, like I was not born an activist, I was made by myself, but I want to make that process much easier for them. So that's why I made this player foundation, We Play Green, that wants to support the players, to inspire them, train them, and activate them, so they become, and so they're activated activists that's fighting for this.
Relating to that, there is also a question from the audience coming in, which I see a lot of people have pushed forward in the Slido. When you talk about like trying to motivate fellow players, somebody in the audience asks, not long ago, football players from France laughed off a journalist's question on plane travel. And that person is asking, how challenging has it been to engage with players on climate?
Well, I think that's the perfect example of where the football world is at now. It's in a bubble, which, it's in a bubble, and that somebody have to breach that bubble, because, that was just an extreme example. I don't know if everybody knows what happened, but, there was Mbappe and the French PSG coach who was asked to maybe they should consider taking the train to a away game instead of flying a private jet. And they were laughing at the question.
Yeah.
I mean, that just describes where we are at this point. And we're just coming from a World Cup, which is probably the most devastating event, sporting event ever in terms of not human rights, which was the only thing that was spoken about, but in terms of just, the climate environmental part of it, which was really not even, there was some people mentioning it in the end, but, that was also always ends up in the background, which I really do. Yeah, it is a big challenge, and it's a lot of work that has to be done. But I really do believe that if we're able to activate the football family, we really make a huge step in solving this crisis.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing it and for all the work you do in really trying to, get people to use their platform and their voices. And when we speak about using platform, using your voice, that makes me immediately go over to you, Marta. Being a young climate activist, can you tell us maybe for starters a bit more about the work that you do and how you try to get your voice out there? If the mic indeed is working.
Working, okay.
Yeah? Oh, great.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's so nice to be with so inspiring people, so thank you. And about me, so I am from Slovakia, and I was part of the Fridays for Future at the beginning of it. So we were like young activists and trying to solve the climate change. And then during the pandemic, me and my 5 friends decided to do more, and we do an online petition to persuade politicians in Slovakia to have climate emergency. And it was the online petition, the biggest online petition in Slovak history, and more than 126,000 of people signed it. And it's so many people because in Slovakia we are just 5 million. So we were trying to do more and to persuade politicians to do more, because I think it's important to be a vegan, to eat tofu, and to have a bike, and to do some small things in our personal life. But I think that politicians have the biggest impact, and I think it's really important to persuade them to do some things. So this is what I do, and I try to knock on their doors and to persuade them that we have to do something. So this is what I do, and I think it's really important to vote, to strike, to go to the protest, and I think it is the biggest impact we have, and we have to do so much things like this.
Absolutely, yeah, and I love how you say that, right? We need to protest, we need to strike, and that sort of also touches into different dimensions, because on the one hand, I hear you saying, you know, there's a lot of power invested into sort of these political realms, right? So you try to influence them to, you know, through voting either, or through, you know, outside external pressure to make different decisions. But then what I always find interesting is, on the one hand, when you're like an activist and you try to protest and strike, there's a sort of rebellious element to it as well. And then on the other hand, you try to sit with these politicians, for example, to try and sort of negotiate a more ambitious climate pathway. Do you think either of the two, so like the more diplomatic way or either the more activistic way, is better, or do you think it's like a fine line that we sort of have to balance?
Yeah, so I'm 26, and when I was younger, I was really like a wild activist, and I was protesting and so on. And now I am more diplomatic type of activist.
Okay, oh. So you're like with a big banner in front of their door, let's talk.
So now I am trying to, like, we were at the presidential palace with Zuzana Čaputová. She's the president of Slovak Republic, so we talk a lot about some issues with her, also with the Ministry of Environment in Slovakia. So now I am not so wild activist, I'm really diplomatic activist. So.
Right. To make sure that they'll let you into the front door when you,
And I think it's really important, because in Slovakia now we have the first climate legislation, thanks to the people who were really aware and they want to do more about the climate. So I think it's really important to push the politicians.
That's grand. Congrats. That's actually really, really nice. Thank you so much. Also, in the meantime, please do keep on sending in your questions, you know, for any one of the panelists. But thank you so much for sharing that with us, Marta. Frans, if I can go to you. You and I, we know each other a little bit. We do. Maybe I already made the audience a bit curious at the beginning. I introduced you also as a community pact leader, but might be a big buzzword for people who don't know what it is yet. So could you maybe give us a bit of an idea or some concrete examples of what it is that you do exactly being a pact community leader?
Yes, so I'm extremely grateful about my parents and all the ambassadors that are here, because I would have never considered being on this stage after 2 years, because I did advocacy, how the pact was being formed. I was part indeed also of the Fridays for Future movements in The Hague, also in Rotterdam. And I also even thought about this energy from 2019 from Greta Thunberg, but also from the Yellow Vest movement. I come from a conservative area where sustainability and many measures are conceived as a threat to many farmers, and I try to help them out to see, no, it is a good way to transform. And I brought many young people into the House of Europe in The Hague to really funnel this energy from civil society to make sure that we make a Green Deal for youth, for the next generation. Many young people are not engaged in EU institutions, which is more difficult than national, local institutions. Then I became an ambassador myself. I focused on getting more young professionals towards the EU level, because there's to lobby the lobby is also a great way. And now being a coordinator, I do 3 tasks. So I help my 100 ambassadors in the Benelux community. Some are doing their first action and I help them along. Some are already champions but don't know yet about how Brussels works, because when I talk about the EU, with some it really resonates, but with many they see the hurdles and the bureaucracy, and only that thought already keeps them away from engaging with. And by creating a social community with the pact, you show it's not actually that hard. Okay, of course you need to work a little bit, but just having this mental and social support really brings more citizens towards it. And I link the various governments. So with the governor of mayors, I've got my contact in Nieuwegein with the mayor. I contact with the House of the Commission representation and also with my national government. So now I'm also asked to join the strategic advisory for the national social climate program, which creates the synergy between Europe and what we're doing in the member states.
Absolutely. I feel like you really embody like the heart of this panel, really bringing like all those levels together. If I may ask you actually, Frans, because I saw the question also coming in the chat box, and it links actually to what you mentioned at the very start. Because somebody's asking, can you share tips or tricks to engage with people who are not climate activists? You mentioned at the very start that you also come from, and you grew up in this region where it was, because I spoke with you also about this, just personally knowing each other. But I know that you've mentioned before that on the one hand you grew up in sort of as a bridge between sort of these two worlds. So on the one hand, the quote unquote maybe a bit more conservative people.
I'm a regionalist and a cosmopolitan. I really have both sides on it.
Yeah.
And those types of people really think differently. Because when I was asking my sister about, hey, what shall I say to Frans Timmermans to give my regards to him, my sister was like, who is this person?
I don't know.
And also those people we need to engage, because maybe EU does not resonate with the pact we are able.
How do we do it? How do we make sure that we sort of bridge the difference, these different worlds, sort of, right?
Yeah, so I explain them how policy is affecting their lives, whether they want it or not. Politics is not something you can look away. It is something that maybe you don't have to embrace it, but at least acknowledge it. And if there is something that you know, which person to contact. Because in democracy, it's not about voting for parties, but also building relations with your representatives. Yeah. I think in my conservative area, people are just voting to many extreme right parties that do nothing for climate action. Despite migration is something they want to tackle, and climate action is the best way to prevent massive migration streams. But it's about talking about the social and cultural elements that do matter. For instance, we have many farmers' activities. Next week, I'm going to the carnival season. And it's super interesting to see that they're not putting the sustainability tag on it, but they already do some actions that are sustainable. For instance, we like to create carnival wagons, so beautiful wagons that are parading through the streets.
Yeah.
And they, fully from circular materials, they remade the house to make those wagons. Yeah. And first giving the acknowledgement what they already do, and that there is actually support from governments how to do more of this type of behavior. That's a way to engage those communities.
That's a good one, right? So looking at what is already happening and sort of like leveraging that up. Kata, maybe from that same perspective, how do you, relating to that same question, how do you deal with perhaps resistance or apathy perhaps that you might also see from people within, for example, Budapest, against climate action or not super interested in taking climate action? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's not easy. There were some concrete questions on what are we doing with citizens' engagement. We're trying this tool that many other cities do. It's like participatory budgets. It's quite new thing in Hungary, so we're in the beginning. It's not an easy. Also, we're doing these citizen panels. So we're calling out for citizen assembly on climate, on clean air. Now we will have a new open debate on a symbolic issue of one of our bridges that was primarily used by cars. And we would like to change this, so it will be used by bicycles and public transport and for pedestrians. But we will engage public in that, so in that discussion. Right. Because, of course, sometimes it's so easy to say, like, do more, do more, do more. But many of these climate actions, it's not just about, like, putting up some solar panels that's nice for everyone. But it's about redistributing a lot of our built environment, rethinking our cities, rethinking our public spaces. When we say that we support public transport, for a lot of people it means we are not supporting cars. And this is not a wow, sexy thing for everybody. And there is resistance, but you need to persist. And this is why we say, okay, let's see if we close down something that was always used by cars and always built by cars. Doesn't matter if it's a bridge or if it's a street. And let's see how people react.
Yeah.
And if they like it. But these are real day-to-day battles. So it's not that if a mayor says that I'm very green, it's not that, oh, you will be elected. No. So this is especially if the wind is blowing against you, maybe.
I like how you say it's also bigger than that, right? It's also about when we talk about plastic pollution, just to name an example, everybody wants a clean city as well, so making it bigger than just on the surface what it is. Thanks for sharing that as well. Morten, if I can go to you, I'm actually curious to hear as well from you when we talk about the future and moving forward, best practices. From the perspective of We Play Green, are there any successes that you're really proud of, that things that you guys were able to do or change, that are really dear to your heart and you look back on proudly?
Well, of course, there's all these small changes that it starts always with yourself, I think, as beginning, on this journey, because it is a journey, and that's what I'm trying to explain to the other players as well who are joining, that like you don't have to be perfect now, but we need to all move in the right direction. And I think that's the starting point. And then it's about to understand all the different possibilities you have as an individual. Of course, we all have what we have in our own life, but we can also affect things on our working place. So my working place is my club. So I was actually going to the club and asking, hey, what can we do together? I was playing in Heerenveen, and one day I said, okay, I'll bike to training, because it was 5-10 minutes driving, and it was 5 minutes if I used the bike, because in the Netherlands the bike roads, they're so well connected. So it was actually shorter. So I did this for 1 week. And then the club said, hey, that's a really good idea. And the week after, the whole team started to bike, and they biked the rest of the day. So, that just shows, that these are things that's positive, inspiring things that's showing that this isn't about moving backwards, this is about moving forwards. And that's kind of my key discovery of my whole activism, is that, people, we need to get this message to become positive and to show that the green transition, what is on the other side, is not negative. It's better for everyone. And, it shows we need to inspire people and open their eyes to what are the possibilities on the other side. That's when you create momentum. And I think that's also when we're speaking about public, people engaging in, I understand all the politicians, because they're having these problems all the time. They need to be re-elected. And I think the conversation is too much based on, we end up always in the problem. There's a lack of public support. We need to increase the public support to be able to go through these transitions we need. And then we need to inspire people and show the positive sides of it. And that's, I think, through football, that is possible, because that is something positive, and that is something people like. So if you can try to implement these messages through football, and of course reaching the grassroots and the supporters, that's where the change will be made.
Yeah. Thank you. There's also a question about that, and I would like to hear your reflections as well, Frans. So there was a question just now where people asked, how do we make sure that we use the fan base, the big fan base that football has, to sort of make sure that we get this leverage in action? And I would also like to afterwards go to you, Marta, and then to you, Frans, because there's also a question for you, Marta, which is, which are the steps and best tips to leverage an opinion movement and petition for climate from the side of grassroots associations?
I think I will have a lot of tips, but you should write me then. I will write it.
Send them all.
A lot of steps.
Yeah.
But what we did different, normal climate, like Greenpeace organization or so on, that we did climate activist sexy, because we have some photo shoots with influencers. We have a really nice shooting, and also the videos, and everything was so nice, and we used Instagram, Facebook, and we did it sexy. Climate activists are not just people who are like Greta Thunberg, or people who are in the forest or whatever. But
tofu eating Tesla drivers, as was mentioned earlier, right?
We want to spread the knowledge that everyone should be the climate activist.
Right.
That's what we did, and I think it was really important that we also use a lot of influencers, and a lot of influencers in Slovakia were like, okay, I will do it for free, and it was really cool. So Instagram was really, really good on it, because we have so many people who were like, okay, I will help you and I will write about your petition.
That's interesting that you mention it, with, like using indeed like these popular figures sort of to leverage change. Because like if we flip it around, Morten, like you're a football player. I can imagine that a lot of fans, for example, from Union Berlin or whichever team, might also really look up to you. So like, how do you see like sort of how do you feel like you could leverage that almost exemplary role almost to make sure that this fan base of football is leveraged into action?
Yeah, I think that's how it's kind of all connected through the player. The player, they are the leaders of the football family, but the masses are of course in the supporters. That's where when we're speaking about the 5 billion people figure, that's of course more than 4 billion fans all over the world. So that's the people you want to reach. So and I think now we're at the point where for a long time there's been a very stupid understanding that football and politics shouldn't be involved. So everybody understands that that's not the case. So I think, but we're still in a world where I kind of a lot of football players feel that the player behind the football player is not seen, because of course you're famous and your voice is heard because you're a football player and you're good at football. Yeah. But there are now a room for implementing also the showing the supporters you're more than a football player. You're also a person. You're an individual. You're a citizen. We're all in the same boat. And I think that connection to that's the connection that's kind of become lost also because football has gone the way that it's gone, and it's been an industry. It's become an industry which is. It's showing all the things that is already wrong with society. But I think there's still a big chance that we can correct this, and I think there's a big chance for players to take an active role, showing that they're more than also citizens, they care about these problems, and in this way engage with the fans, because I think then you create a strong relation, and then you can actually manage to make a difference.
Frans, I see you nodding.
Give an example how we can facilitate it with this pact and also with these stakeholders, because football is an industry, and also that it engages some sponsors, because we also want to prevent with the Climate Pact to do greenwashing, and you can do small actions. For instance, in Rotterdam, Feyenoord, they gave away free grass if you would remove the tiles from your home. So many people contributed to climate adaptation because that soccer group gave the grass that you can put in your own garden and say, hey, I've got my own football stadium grass. And we say, then this is a way to massively engage people. But we also need to inform that it cannot only be like good things, we also need to stop the bad things. Because with soccer and football, many fossil players still sponsor that. And we should stop that, because we should stop normalizing entering polluting companies in the most iconic social elements that we have in society. And maybe not soccer players themselves can do it, but I also know in Europe there are pressure groups that want to do that. And maybe some supporters would also agree with that. And I think with the pact we can create a coalition of the willing and how to change the status quo. And so by activists, getting engaged in it, that are also supported by cities that can create this EU emissions strategy on climate adaptation to really make sure that more people that want to have their own proud stadium grass on the street, and with soccer players that can help to really be a front-running model player, we can stop the greenwashing and we can stop doing harm and really do something good. And I think that is like ideal with the pact that we can facilitate on really a massive scale.
Altogether. Oh, I really like that idea. I think it's a good point. Somebody here likes it as well. Thank you very much. Morten, I saw you wanted to respond. I think it's working now.
Just needs time. Yeah, you've done this before. So yeah, I was just commenting on what you said with the sponsors, and that's totally correct. And I just a very good example of that was the Super League, of course, and what happened when the supporters turned out the Super League. And that was the power of the football family. That was the power of the supporters. Imagine if we could try to do, and imagine if we could create the same thing of a support movement who's demanding green changes in society. And I mean, that's what we're striving for, creating that engagement by people, and you see what you're able to create.
Right. That's really cool. That also touches upon what Mr. Timmermans said at the very start, right? That this populist movement, it sort of also demands what we need from industry and organizations and sectors to change. I like your suggestion, Frans. So anybody that's interested in this coalition of the willing, I think, am I at liberty to indeed say that you can go find Frans after the panel? That being said, I would like to actually turn to you, our audience, because we have a little Slido poll for you as well. So if you could all pull out your phones again. You know, this entire panel we've been talking about these different areas where we want to see more climate action. So I'm really curious to hear from you at what level and in which area do you want to see more climate action? So is that within business and industry, EU and international level, national and local level, civil society community, individual? As people fill this out, Kata, may I go to you? How would you answer this question?
Sure. So if you're thinking about business and industry, it means that you're looking at the legislators. So business and industry is driven by profit, and this won't change.
Right.
This is the role of the legislators on the local level, on the national level, on the European level, and more on the European level with all these big companies. So this is
the importance,
of the legislators. So what we can do on the European level, like for cities, this is what we do in the Committee of the Regions. We are building communities of mayors, and we are handing out handbooks, like step by step, how to go in that green door, what legislations can you do, what good practices you have.
So it's really about bringing these tangible ways of implementing legislation.
But waiting for business and industry
to
say bye-bye to profit.
Marta, how would you answer this question?
Like for me, it's really important to do things at the national and local level.
Okay.
That's what I do, and I think all the fields are really important, and we have to do all. Also, I am a journalist, so I think the media has a really big role, and I think that it is really important to inform people by the media.
Yeah.
And I know that it is now war in Ukraine, pandemic, inflation, but I think that climate crisis should be more in news.
Right.
And that's what I think is also important as the way that I'm a journalist. So
yeah, that's a good point. And it's a good perspective, and that importance cannot be undermined. And I see indeed a lot of different answers. The biggest answer, most popular answer, business and industry, but a lot of people indeed, as the both of you said, Kata and Marta, indeed, national, local level, EU and international, so the legislative level, so to say. But sports, media, culture, and we see civil society, community and individual levels. Thank you very much to our audience for providing us those insights. And I also right away want to thank our panel, because unfortunately that also brings us already to the end of this conversation. But Marta, I think you summed it up perfectly at the end, that all these levels are necessary, just like all the work that you all do individually is necessary. And yeah, it's all about just gluing and bringing that together. Frans, you did a nice suggestion during the panel, so thank you for that. So can we get a big round of applause for our 4 panelists? Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for being here. And I would say with that energy, let's hop right into our next conversation. Because since the Climate Pact was launched 2 years ago, we have already seen and we've already been speaking about all these unprecedented crises that have shaken our lives, right? So whether it's the energy crisis that we've seen, or whether it's an ongoing climate crisis, environmental degradation, we see how more and more tangible the effects of these crises are coming in our everyday lives. So this next panel really focuses on this question of how can we work together to keep up hope and step up action, but how can we also make sure that we have this systemic change that we need, because we need individual action, but we also need these bigger systems to allow us to make fundamental changes with respect to that. Well, that is what the next panel will all be about. So I'm really excited and honored to welcome forward the next guests. First of all, can we have a warm welcome for Mrs. Clara de la Torre, who is the Deputy Director General for Climate Action here at the European Commission. Welcome, Mrs. de la Torre. Very happy to have you. Then we have none other than Alessio Terzi, who is an economist, a lecturer, and author of a new book called Growth for Good, Reshaping Capitalism to Save Humanity from Climate Catastrophe. Alessio, warm welcome to you. It's great to have you. Then, can we have a warm welcome as well for Lian Poa, who is the community leader and founder of Drinkable Rivers Citizen Science and Community Action Program. A big round of applause for Lian. Good having you. And of course, last but not least, the big honor for Annika Davert, who is a climate activist and member of Fridays for Future. Annika, very happy to have you as well. Now, you guys, thank you so much for being here. We have the very easy task for this panel to talk about how we bring about systemic change so that, like, all the big changes also really make sure that we take climate action. So, no pressure, I would say. No, I'm very happy that you're here. And maybe, Clara, if I can start with you. Because just now, at the very end, we were also talking about what sorts of areas we need change in, right? And we had both Kata and Marta say that this legislative impact is really important. Now, you being the Deputy Director General for Climate Action here at the European Commission, how do you, maybe for starters, take stock of these past 2 years of the Climate Pact, but also what do you think is the role and especially maybe also requirement that we would need to see from this legislative side?
That's a complicated question, but that's a very pertinent one. For these 2 years that we have had the pact, I think we together with you all, we managed to build, if I can say, a missing link that we had, because the EU policy has legislation, and we can come back to that for your question. We have, as you know, a number of financing and funding instruments, because all this transformation needs a lot of investment. But we needed to have a closer and more active link with the citizens, with the regional and local authorities. And I think with this pact, and thanks to you all, and many of you that are not with us today, we have made this link become more concrete. And you gave at the beginning a number of figures, more than 700 ambassadors. We have saved with your pledges more than 24,000 trips between Madrid and New York, I would say.
Instead of Paris and New York.
So this has created a movement and a number of actions with great impact and effect beyond what we are all anyhow obliged to do by legislation.
Right.
And the legislation is necessary. I think the deputy mayor of Budapest was just telling us, companies, but we can take other examples, companies are not going to say, give away my profits. So you need to, and I was using yesterday the example, I used to be a smoker, it has nothing to do with CO2, but with other, very often you don't change your behavior like this. You need someone to push you to change the behavior. And for that, these are the public authorities are there. So the purpose of the legislation we had in place and that we are putting in place and that we will be putting in place is precisely to induce this change in lifestyle, in the way we move, we eat, we produce, and also to provide, that's very important, the incentives to do so. Because it's not a question of only obliging, punishing. No, it's giving incentives and enabling different activities and different businesses.
To happen, yeah. I like also what you said, right? That all these actions, and indeed, very good memory, the over 24,000 round trips, but like the impact that we see that happens outside of the scope of regulation and the power of that. But then again, indeed, we also need, on the other side, this regulation and this legislation to support that. Thank you for that, indeed. Alessio, if I may turn to you next. I mentioned you have written a book, Growth for Good. By the way, also really cool, I didn't mention it in the introduction just now, but your book was selected among the best books of 2022 by Foreign Affairs and The Economist here at the European Commission. So this is really cool. But I'm asking you about it because I think oftentimes when we talk about systemic change, it can be so abstract and like this big buzzword. So can you maybe take us through some of the ideas that you also present in your book and how we can very concretely bring about change to have growth for good in that respect?
Yes, I mean, systemic change and abstract is what I do, so I thrive in abstraction. And to my mind, we were stuck for a long time in this, what is called a cycle of blame. So everybody pointing finger at somebody else, whether it is citizens saying it's companies that should do more, companies saying, but it should be governments telling us what we should be doing, governments being like, but citizens don't give me a mandate to do that. And so we were stuck in this negative equilibrium, which is why climate change has been known for a long time. We had Jacques Chirac, the president of France, in 2003 saying Notre maison brûle. So it's been around at the highest levels of government for a long time, but nothing was moving. And I think that the spark to get out of this negative equilibrium is people in this room, to a certain extent, as in it starts with citizens. It is citizens that break this negative loop, and they do that along multiple dimensions. They do that by voting, but they do that also by being consumers, and so thinking about wanting, less deforestation, as Timmermans was saying, and they do that by being also employers. We were talking about football, so being a very specific employer, but actually you can do it as an employee within companies. And once you start doing this push, you are effectively moving to a different ball game. And you're generating a positive spin, because it means that you add value, you see value in green alternatives, and that means that companies are not giving up profits in the name of green, but it's actually smart business to think, how can I become sustainable? Because that's the trend of the future. When I talk to companies, I'm not telling them give up profits, I'm telling them you're stupid if you remain stuck in the industries of the future, of the past, and not look at the future. You're the ones that are investing. If you're investing in fossil fuels now, you're the ones investing in horse carriages, I know that's a passion of yours, at the turn of the last century. Yeah. So you're at the beginning of the car era and you're investing in horses. That doesn't make sense. So it's not smart business, and so businesses will start moving as well, and then that gives ammo to politicians as well. We've seen it. I mean, the Green Deal comes on the back of elections. Elections that come on the back of Fridays for Future protests. So effectively, protests, citizens have given ammo, well, have voted, have changed the composition of a parliament, which has given ammo to the legislator to get those that legislation in place. And that's why I think that we're entering into a positive type of equilibrium, slowly. Yeah. And that's why continue doing what you're doing effectively in this room.
Oh, that's interesting indeed. So you say that almost this pointing the fingers of, oh no, it has to come from the legislative side, or no, it has to come from the company side, or we'll wait until he or she does this or that it's like we have a breakthrough through it when we have people just say, you know what, put that on hold, we're going to take the reins in our own hand and take action in that sense. That's interesting. That's really, really interesting. And I think, a great analogy and a great testimony to the work being done by the people in the room. You hinted towards Annika. I am, first of all, very interested to hear about this horse riding or horse carriage thing you're into, but I'm also more curious, of course, to hear, Annika, from your background as well with Fridays for Future. What you guys do initially is community building, right? It's getting these people, bringing them together and make sure that you sort of demand action. So apart from the horse riding, also very curious to hear, what is the importance of that community building, and do you have like any best practices of how to do that? Also, perhaps for the people in the room that want to, enlarge in their communities in that sense.
So first about the horse riding, I'm a proud horse rider. I think that's all. Okay.
Very nice. Yeah. Good point.
So yeah, I'm an activist with Fridays for Future. I founded Fridays for Future in Salzburg quite exactly 4 years ago. So I've been striking almost 4 years for almost every Friday whenever it was possible.
Wow.
And about the community building, there has been a study conducted by a professor of mine at university in Vienna that, and they investigated different countries with their climate movements and compared it to their climate policies. And they found out that the stronger the climate movement, the stronger the policies.
Wow.
So this is scientific proof that actually grassroots movements and youth movements can change something, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that these climate actions are good enough, are strong enough, that the climate crisis is solved. That's not it. But there's definitely a trend, and there's definitely proof that whatever you do, it will change something. And for me personally, especially this past year, it's been 4 years already, like 4 years of striking, 4 years of creating a momentum, being pushed down by COVID, which was really hard for us because that's the most COVID unfriendly thing you can do, is bringing tons of people on the street. So we had to try to live through COVID. We eventually did it. But sometimes the climate crisis seems so unsolvable. And the thing I want to remind myself of is that each tenth, each split of a degree matters. And if it's 1 centimeter less of the sea level rising, if it's one person less dying, that's something I want to achieve. And that's why we're still here, we're still protesting, we're putting pressure on politicians. And on March 3rd is the next global climate strike, just advertising here. Yeah. And that's why we need everyone. Yeah. And we want to reach everyone to work towards our goal, which is climate justice.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. I also love how you said that. You gave this example of, indeed, very often we tend to think about it so in such a binary way that either we have climate change or we don't. Either we prevent, global warming to, stay under 1.5 or we don't. But as you said, it's like a continuum. Every tenth of a degree matters to somebody somewhere. It can save, ecosystems somewhere, livelihood for people somewhere, food security for people somewhere. So I think that's so important. 3rd of March, I'm going to put that in my agenda. I'm actually curious also from the room, maybe also to get you in a bit of movement. You mentioned the importance of climate movements. I am curious to hear from the room if you've ever been to a climate strike. Can I ask people to stand up if you've ever been to a climate protest? Let's see. Okay, you see, you guys, I think we have an amazing balance between the diplomatic people and the protesters. Applause for yourself. That's amazing. That's grand. That's good to see. Because I can use your evidence now, Annika, that indeed it contributes to more ambitious climate policy. So it really does help to have a strong climate movement in that sense. Of course, comes in many forms. Hey, I want to go to you, Lian, because I know that with drinkable rivers, you have a really, at least in my opinion, I think a really beautiful mission, but you also do a lot of community building to get people involved with that mission that you try to pursue. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so yes, I have experienced a drinkable river, and that has changed the course of my life, having for a whole month directly drink from the river and realizing that my own river is not drinkable anymore. And I thought, this was normal, but we forgot it, even to imagine it. And so it became my personal compass about 15 years ago or so. And but lately, I think it needs to be a societal compass, because somehow our our awareness goes up, but still our statistics go also either exponentially up or exponentially down. So we need something that we understand, that is simple and that is mobilizing, and that's why I work towards a world with drinkable rivers with our foundation right now, and propose the world with drinkable rivers as a compass. And the idea is that everything that happens on the land contributes to the water. So ultimately, in the lowest parts of our landscape, it will end up in our rivers. So that's like a mirror of how we live. And so also, if we then have a world with drinkable rivers, it means we're living healthy and in balance. And so we'll also have climate stabilization and a lot of species. And so how I mobilize, and that's something I notice now today, I think, is that I think there's a good distinction between action and being an activist. So I try not to say that I'm an activist, because then you sort of make yourself an exception, whereas that needs to become the norm now. And so maybe that's something we can already adopt very easily, like to say, why does me wanting healthy rivers and a stabilized climate make me an activist, whereas when you're polluting, not making you a terrorist, like turning it around. I think it's so easy then to get many more people, and that's also how I do it. We were talking about football players and fans that reaches 5 billion people. Well, we all need water every day, so we're talking about 8 billion people. So if we're doing it as in aligning it with the values of life and the natural cycles and what is conducive to life and our living qualities, then people start to identify, yes, I'm not only a mayor of Budapest, but I'm also a mayor of the river, of the Danube there. And so we're all part of these watersheds, and it's an identity we didn't realize yet, but we are river families. So in that sense, you're not making a distinction between, you're an activist or you're not an activist, but we're all water beings. And so from this common ground, I have a very concrete. So I'm not into abstractions because I see that's a pitfall. Not that to say that there's a value to it, but to say in order to get it more simple with everyone, we need to feel it. It needs to be poetic. It needs to be concrete, and that's with a drinkable river. That's what I work on.
Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. I really love how you say. And I find it fascinating, even like what we make the default, right? Yeah. So wanting a stabilized climate, drinkable rivers, a healthy environment, wanting that, making that the exception indeed by saying that,
it should almost be like, duh.
Yeah, of course,
That becomes it.
Like, it's so logical. It's obvious that you'd want that. So I like, I'm gonna implement this in my own personal life right away. Yeah, making that the default, and anything that sort of, enforces the opposite, so enforces pollution or destruction, to make that indeed the active sort of position of trying to, you called it terrorism, but indeed.
No, and it's not to make a new distinction then but to make it more, that people feel it, that when you are polluting, it is going against life.
Yeah, that's nicely said. Thank you so much. In the meantime, we also have some questions coming into the chat. So to those of you that have not submitted their questions yet, please do send them in. We have one question for you, Clara, and that is, what is the Commission doing to better engage with citizens and youth?
We're doing a number of things. We've been doing for years. You know that we have a Director General for Education that has a lot of dialogues with young people. We ourselves, in the Pact, in these 2 years, we have had groups of young people, for example, organizing a youth strategy. And it was very much bottom-up, and it was very useful because it was not something imposed. So we have been doing tests. We are now, I don't think I'm betraying the institution if I say that we are thinking of a new way of to engage youth in our shaping of our climate policy. We are thinking of the details, how to do it, because the concept is easy. We need to hear, as you were saying, I mean, these movements and these calls and these protests are very helpful because they give legitimacy to a number of things, and also issues what citizens want. But it's not easy because for several reasons. The diversity among youth is very big. We have rich young people, we have poor young people, we have educated young people, we have non-educated young people. We have people that, young people, that live in the north, that live in the south, with very different climate conditions. So that's already a very diverse. Second, there are many, and I'm glad about that, many youth organizations. So we have to find a way in which we organize an efficient dialogue so that we hear what's going on, that we can do something with what we hear. It's not just a question of dialogue and then I go home. To manage expectations of everyone, and for this to be seen to politicians. And if you meet politicians like Mr. Timmermans, I mean, he's speaking with young people all the time, and so there's no problem. But not everyone is like him in national or in EU level. So we need to find a way in which this shows, not to pretend that this shows the added value that it has. So we are thinking about it, and stay tuned. We'll come back.
Ooh, I like that. Ooh, that's interesting, but it's an important point you make. I do agree. Very often we tend to think of youth as this homogeneous group of, all like-minded and all similar people, but it's very important indeed that we at least make it a very representative sort of engagement that we have with them. Annika, I saw you wackling your brain, listening to Clara. Is there any, because you guys, of course, you are young people. I mean, we are young people. You try to, all of us, you try to sort of get into those, almost negotiation rooms, political rooms, to make sure that you have your influence there. Are there any obstacles, perhaps, that you often encounter that you want to share with Clara, but with the people here in the room as well, that might be important for people to know of? Or do you have any best practices with how to best engage with young people and include them?
There we go. The obstacles, I think, are just that sometimes we're just preserved that the young people that don't really have a clue. People often say to me, "Oh, go to work, go into the world. You don't even know how the world really is." Something like that. I think I know how the world is. I think I do know more than other people that deny the climate crisis. So the obstacle, especially for me as a woman, as a young woman, being in rooms with old white men, is just not being taken seriously, like being dismissed, being not even listened at. Until I start speaking, they're like, "Oh, she does have something to say."
Right.
So that's just one of these things. In terms of getting into the rooms, I think it gets better. And for us in Fridays for Future, the most important message we want to bring is that everyone should listen to the scientists and not necessarily talk to the youth, because all we say is the science has been clear for years. Please listen to them and ask them what to do. I often get asked, what's the action, if you could enforce one action, what would it be? I'd be like, I don't know, listen to the scientists. I'm a youth activist. I just point there. So that's basically how it is for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. But also like that confrontation with biases that people have, right? That they're like, "Oh, what a good point you make," and that you're like, "What makes you say that?" Indeed, and then you're sort of confronted with what's beneath it. I think that's also an important one to mention and to point out, because I think that helps to recognize it as well. Yeah, it's a good point. Alessio, there's also a question for you from our audience. Somebody is asking, do you think GDP growth in wealthy economies like the European Union, for example, can go hand in hand with averting planetary breakdown? If so, how? Easy question.
As a matter of fact, yes. As in, I thrive in abstraction and in beyond GDP.
Okay.
Type of,
oh, nice.
And I'll be brief. I lecture on some of these things, but the condensed 1-minute version of it is, to me, GDP is a statistical tool that measures or tries to measure, sometimes better, sometimes worse, economic growth. So let's put that aside for a second. Let's put aside GDP and focus on economic growth. To my mind, economic growth is about creating value. And that links to what I was saying before, which is if we see value in restoring a relationship with nature, in greener products, greener conducts, and so on, that is value creation, and the companies that will provide that will be generating growth. It is something that you, Hajar, was saying, as a matter of fact, earlier. At the beginning, you were like, yes, certain activities will expand, others should go away, we should get rid of. And so the shape of our economy will change. Certain things we will get rid of, the polluting ones, the CO2 intensive ones, but also the linear ones, the linear model of consumption, moving to more circular type of production. And in that process, you will generate value, therefore you will generate growth. Whether that is captured by GDP the way this is measured right now or not is a separate issue, and I think that we will need to revise, improve the way we measure GDP, but that ultimately that is it's trying to track growth, which is what matters, actually.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I like how you said that it's about generating value, but then indeed, what do we understand within value, right? And as you said, like with the work that you do, for example, Jan, you're generating massive value, whether that's natural value or like social value for the people that are, as you said, like you had a full month where you drank directly from the river, like that sort of cohesion and the happiness that can also create for people. Yeah. That's not being measured right now. You want to?
Yeah, because I think that even the founders of GDP, it was born after the wars, and so it was a means, the function of it was to get out of the crisis. Mm-hmm. We have to remember that, right? And now we have different circumstances, and that requires, I think, a very different indicator. So that's why I'm proposing the drinkable river, something that we understand is simple and that we feel as an indicator for a healthy economy. That's what...
Right, because it shows that natural value that is being protected or not.
And we already have the indicators and the parameters to check, to see are we on the right direction or not.
Yeah. That's an interesting one, and maybe actually it's interesting that you raise it. And if I may, I would actually like to ask you about that, Alessio, because on the one hand, it makes me very happy because I'm like, wow, if we can move towards this sort of economy and system where we say we're going to make natural value and societal value, human value weigh just as sharply and as evenly as economic value, then just imagine what sort of different decisions we will be making. At the same time, I'm thinking GDP is just one example, but so many of the rules of the game, so to say, like how our system is shaped, only takes into account that economic value. If you just, for example, I'm a student, I'm a business student, and then when I go to school, they give me a book and they say, well, this is how you do accountancy. You measure what's of importance to the company. And then I literally get a profit and loss statement, and it's only financial cost. Those are the only things that are important enough for me to learn the rules of to write down. But I don't have to write down what the deforestation is that is caused in the production or supply chain of a process. I don't have to write down any costs for the toxins or chemicals released into the atmosphere. So, yeah, maybe you can help me out here, because it also makes me a bit scared that it's so ingrained in so many things. And I'm a young person now, and I like to think of myself as I used to think of myself as a climate activist, but we have a long way to go to change all the rules of all those systems, of accounting, of finance, of GDP measurement, of all those things. Do you think we'll get there soon enough? Alessio, and then Clara, if you want to add to that, please do afterwards as well.
Yes, I mean, what I would say is that to a certain extent this is a fact, so you're right, and at the same time it is changing in the sense that progressively companies are being required to give a broader statement of their activities that is not only, okay, I'm making money, but also making money and a battery of other things, also in terms of attracting investment. And I then leave it to Clara because she can tell us more about things like the taxonomy or so on. But the approach there is to say we are trying to measure a broader set of parameters also for the private sector that go beyond just telling me, okay, I made this amount of money, therefore I'm a good company.
Right.
So that on one side. On the other side, also for companies, and it links to what I was saying before, is to say, you know, what type of growth you're generating matters. And to a certain extent, planet-destroying type of value generation is non-value. Or it's a value that is anchored in the past, and more consumers and citizens and your employees will come knocking on your door asking for information about what your actions are. Eventually, I would suppose that once we are there, you will be generating value. And so at that point, very far away in the future, these extra metrics will no longer matter because it will be so obvious to everyone that value generation happens in a certain way and not in the old way, that it won't matter anymore. But right now we need those extra indicators for countries, for companies, and so on.
So as you said at the beginning, right, where you go up to companies and you're like, you're stupid if you don't take it into account because you're putting at risk your own future and the continuity of your own company. Yeah, absolutely. Clara, if you would like to add, please.
Two very quick things, because I see there are plenty of questions. Remember that we are, indeed, we have to take into consideration other parameters rather than purely financial, and you know that there are works and directives and standards in the Union precisely for what we call non-financial reporting of companies. Yeah. You were mentioning the taxation. That's a complicated matter, but still, that's the same perspective, is add a qualitative dimension to what until now it was only quantitative. This being said, something much more simple. We should not be seeing fight against climate change as a trade-off with economic growth. We can agree or disagree whether economic growth is the measure of happiness, doesn't matter, but we should not, there is not. The Union is an example, and this is what we say to our partners in the world, where we have been reducing emissions, not enough, we agree, but we've been reducing emissions around 25% since 1990, and at the same time we've been having an increase in our GDP by 60%. So we have to also to say to those that are not educated in that field, because not everybody is educated in that field, is that there is not necessarily a trade-off. What is clear is that if we don't reduce emissions, we will become more poor.
Yeah.
We're empowering ourselves. So
yeah, that's a good point indeed. Thank you for adding that. I think that has a lot of. It's also important to acknowledge within this conversation. Hey, we are almost nearing the end of the panel, but I do see indeed that we have some questions from our audience left, so I would like to tackle a couple of them. Maybe Annika, if I can go to you first. There is one at the bottom that says, do you think the communication lines between climate activists and scientists are effective? How could we improve these?
So I can only again speak for me in Austria, and I think they're quite good. We have Scientists for Future, and they're supporting us. We're supporting them, and we can call up whenever we have questions. They're also supporting other movements. So yeah, I think they're good. I would love if, as I'm speaking already,
to answer the last question.
Answer the last question as well.
Well, of course you may, which is about how do we ensure that climate protests are inclusive and invite all levels of society? Please, I would love to have the answer.
Yes, so this is a question I also get very often because the climate movement tends to be very white, very female, and very privileged, and that's a fact. But I understand that people have these questions, but I don't really see the problem of it because the climate crisis is made by incredibly privileged people and is affecting the poorer people. So it's our job as well to do these climate protests and to work against it. So I think since I'm a white, quite privileged person, it's my responsibility to be a climate activist, to dedicate my time into ensuring that the climate crisis doesn't get any worse. So that doesn't mean we're not inclusive. We try to be as inclusive as possible, and I think we try to offer a platform for those that want to do something but don't have much time. It's a Friday on the 3rd of March where everyone can go to, spend one hour, maybe two, go there, make a statement, and go home again. It's not that much time, it's not that much effort. It's mostly in the afternoon. Take your kids with you, take whoever, and just come and take a statement. I think that's incredibly inclusive, and that's the beauty of such big movements as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I like what you said. It also makes me think, by the way that you phrased it and about bringing somebody that you know, it makes me think of what Frans said in the previous panel about, you know, how much it makes a difference if you can just sort of invite people there, you know, and be that sort of like guiding person or like that social contact that somebody already knows to make it easier. So I think that's a beautiful message as well to do that. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, there was one question for you, Lian, which I found really interesting, and I would really like to pose it to you, because somebody in our audience is asking, your story is an example of generational shifting baselines. Any tips to counter this bias and make people realize how bad our situation is? And maybe, because I can imagine that perhaps not everybody might know what generational shifting baselines would entail. Maybe if you want to...
Yeah. Yeah, it indeed, that I had sort of the privilege to experience a river that was drinkable, that was, by the way, in Canada, the Rupert River. And then 3 years later, I returned to the river and it was not drinkable anymore. So it was that combination of experiences that is the privilege to have it in such a short amount of time, but it was also the shock of one time just experiencing the beauty on the one hand and then the frustration of that it's lost. And then to realize that we have lost amongst the generations, and then we were shifting to a normal state. That's what shifting baseline syndrome is. So we take it now for granted that it comes from the tap and that it has millions of kilometers of pipelines, which was already quite utopian a few years ago as well. So it's just making people aware that it's only a few generations ago in many places, like in India, it was maybe 1 or 2 generations ago that almost all rivers were drinkable, and now almost none. Here, maybe longer ago, maybe 6 or 7 or generations. But just to realize that it was not so long ago, a few generations, if you see on our whole history, and then to ingrain them that what they want. So we talked about that earlier, follow your passion. I say follow your singing heart. And often this is also a world with clean air, healthy soils and drinkable rivers. And so then to put everyday action. And so now we have a community of mayors for drinkable rivers. We have a whole community of citizen scientists around the world. And so this is growing, yeah.
Yeah, in a beautiful way.
With a concrete perspective to act. Because that, I think, is what gives hope, that you feel... I wrote a book, and I thought about this conversation earlier with Frans Timmermans also, that I was in conversation with the climate scientist James Lovelock, and when I was early in my 20s, and so basically listening to him I felt depressed and despair, the things that we've talked about today. And I said to him, but you have the responsibility to give at least hope to me now. Give me one tip. And he said, no, I don't have it. Well, what would you do it when you would be early 20? And he said, I would go and be on the land. And I said, okay, I've heard enough from you. And so I went out and I started planting trees. It's very important that we have a perspective to act.
Wow, that is beautifully said. Thank you so much. And I do agree that perspective, yeah, we can definitely applaud for that. Thank you, guys. That is beautiful, and it's vital, right? Because it gives you something to put your grit in and to sort of move towards and put this need and this want for action in. Hey, this is. You know, time flies when you're learning a lot of things and hearing very wise things from these panelists here, so thank you very much. We would very much like to go to a final Slido to hear from you, our audience, once again, because, well, we've heard many conversations today. You've perhaps heard very confrontational things, very scary numbers. On the other hand, as you just said, Leon, also ways, to take action, to make it very tangible. So we want to hear from you. How do you feel about climate action now? Do you feel more optimistic? Do you feel stressed out by the challenge that we have? What is like the feeling that you leave with? I see hopeful coming in, overwhelmed, motivated, empowered, positive, sad, biased, possible, not specific enough. Consciousness is key, recharged, urgent. Many things coming in. Keep them coming, I would say. I also want to very much thank our panelists, because I think you shared a lot of amazing insights with us, and I think, very honored that we could have you as that last sort of surge, moving forward for action. So can we get a big round of applause for them, everyone? Thank you so much, because that, as I said, brings us already to the end of the event. So today was all about looking back on those 2 years, those first 2 years of the European Climate Pact, and really taking stock of what has happened, but also celebrating all the great things that came from it. I want to thank all our amazing speakers of today. So this panel, the panel before, this morning, our ambassadors that did the showcase, and also Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans. From whichever country you are watching from, thank you very much for joining us with the Slidos, with the questions online, to our online audience as well. Now, if you have your hands all itchy to take action, that is great, because we have a couple of things that you can do moving forward from today. As I said earlier, look at your key cord again, your lanyard, turn it around, take the QR code, and make a climate pledge yourself if you would like to. Also, make sure to check out the Count Us In platform to find more information on actions that you can take in your own daily lives. And stay tuned for what's to come in the upcoming months of the Pact. So we'll have local events or articles coming online, more success stories, more communication, learning, networking opportunities, which I think at essence is what this is all about. Said it before at the very, very beginning, together in action. You need the together part to do that. So I think that just leaves me to say...
Will you give me 1 second?
Clara, for sure.
I would like first to thank you as a great moderator. So fantastic.
Thank you. Very sweet. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like as well to thank the team of the Pact Secretariat with whom we've been working for 2 years and to build all this. To thank my own colleagues who've been putting a lot of work and emotion on this, and thanks to you all here and behind the screen for making this happen.
Thank you so much, Clara. You made me blush right there on stage. One more thing. I would like to ask Serena Anaglokshu if she's here in the room with us to maybe stay afterwards, because we found your passport. Not too unimportant. So if you would come forward, then we have your passport for you. So you can also leave the day with it. That being said, thank you so much for being a lovely crowd. Thank you to the organizing team that really indeed put a lot of effort in it. And there is a networking cocktail in the foyer, so please do have a lovely drink. Have a chat, and make sure to keep the conversation going. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks. Oh, wow, Leah.